Welcome back to The Lost Tactician, where history's forgotten strategies reveal the raw ingenuity of human survival. Today we're venturing beyond the clash of steel and the thunder of siege engines to uncover a different kind of battlefield, one fought with salt, smoke, and sheer desperation. Picture this. Thousands of soldiers encamped outside fortress walls for months. No refrigeration, no resupply routes, and hunger gnawing as fiercely as any enemy blade. How did they eat? The answer isn't just stale bread and jerky. It's a brutal, brilliant science that sustained empires and decided the fate of kingdoms. This is the story of the medieval siege diet, where food preservation became the invisible weapon that could break armies or birth legends. Long before the first stone was hurled from a trebuchet, the real siege had already begun in the fields and granaries miles away. Provisioning an army of 5,000 men for a 3-month siege meant moving mountains of food, literally tons of grain, barrels of meat, and endless casks of liquid sustenance. Medieval commanders understood that logistics could strangle an enemy faster than any sword. Strategic foraging began weeks in advance, with advance units systematically stripping the countryside surrounding the target, harvesting fields, confiscating livestock, and denying the besieged any hope of resupply. This scorched earth approach transformed the landscape into a barren wasteland, ensuring that even if defenders sallied forth, they'd find nothing but dust. The siege train itself was a marvel of medieval engineering, wagons groaning under the weight of preserved provisions, herds of cattle and sheep forming living larders, and specialized craftsmen tasked solely with maintaining the food supply. Every bottleneck, every muddy road, every river crossing became a potential disaster. One overturned wagon could mean hundreds going hungry. The sheer scale of this operation reveals why so many sieges failed, not from superior defense, but from armies starving themselves into retreat before the walls ever cracked. At the heart of medieval food preservation lay three ancient allies: salt, smoke, and sunlight. Salt was the cornerstone, a powerful dehydrator that transformed fresh meat into something that could outlast kingdoms. The process was brutally simple, yet, honestly, scientifically brilliant. Butchers would rub coarse salt deep into every fibre of pork, beef, or fish, or submerge entire carcasses in brine so concentrated it could float an egg. The salt drew out moisture through osmosis, creating an environment so hostile that bacteria simply couldn't survive. The result was meat hard as leather, encrusted in crystalline white armor, packed into barrels that, well, reeked of the sea. Before consumption, soldiers would boil these salted slabs for hours, watching the water turn cloudy with dissolved salt, coaxing the meat back into something resembling edibility. Smoke added another layer of protection. Meat hung in smokehouses absorbed chemicals from burning wood, compounds that acted as natural antimicrobials, while adding a flavor that, frankly, masked the taste of preservation. The smoke didn't just preserve, it sealed meat in an aromatic shroud that kept flies at bay and extended shelf life by weeks. Meanwhile, the sun offered the simplest solution: complete desiccation. Thin strips of meat laid out under Mediterranean skies became jerky, lightweight, and nearly imperishable, though jaw-achingly tough to chew. Grains were the unsung heroes, the caloric backbone of every army. Wheat, barley, oats, and legumes like peas and lentils were dried thoroughly to prevent mold, then packed into leather sacks or wooden chests. These could be ground into flour for hardtack, biscuits so tough they were nicknamed tooth dullers, or boiled into thick pottages that stretched provisions when meat ran low. When standard provisions began to dwindle, armies turned to increasingly creative and desperate measures. The living larder concept meant driving cattle, sheep, and pigs alongside marching columns, but these animals required grazing land, water, and protection from raiders. They also slowed the army and could be decimated by disease faster than any human force. Fermentation emerged as an unsung savior. Beer and wine weren't luxuries, they were survival tools. The brewing process and alcohol content killed pathogens that made water sources lethally dangerous during sieges. Hard cheeses, heavily salted or waxed, provided crucial fats when milk couldn't be preserved fresh. Vinegar, with its sharp acidity, pickled vegetables and inhibited bacterial growth, adding precious variety to monotonous diets. Some armies attempted siege gardens within protected perimeters, planting fast-growing vegetables under constant threat of enemy arrows. Foraging parties ventured out under moonlight, scraping together wild herbs, roots, and whatever small game hadn't already fled the devastation. Water posed the greatest challenge. Contaminated wells spread dysentery faster than any plague. Armies boiled water when fuel permitted, or relied on beer, wine, or diluted vinegar when it didn't. The siege diet exacted a terrible toll beyond mere hunger. Scurvy crept through camps where fresh vegetables vanished, turning gums spongy and opening old wounds. Dysentery from contaminated food or water could cripple entire battalions more effectively than enemy cavalry. Starvation became a weapon wielded by time itself, transforming proud warriors into gaunt shadows haunted by the gnawing void in their bellies. The psychological impact was equally devastating. Monotony bred resentment. Endless days of hardtack and salted pork eroded discipline and fighting spirit. Commanders who managed their food supplies poorly faced mutiny as readily as defeat. Yet food also became a powerful negotiation tool. Besieged garrisons sometimes surrendered not because their walls fell, but because their larders emptied first. The siege diet determined outcomes as surely as any battle plan. These medieval preservation techniques rippled through history, enabling the age of exploration when ships crossed oceans sustained by salted meat and hardtack. Modern military MREs owe their conceptual ancestry to these ancient rations, lightweight, calorie-dense, designed for extreme conditions. The ingenuity displayed by medieval armies reveals a fundamental truth about human resilience. When survival demands innovation, we transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. The siege diet reminds us that history's great struggles weren't won solely by heroes with swords, but by the invisible labor of preserving food, the knowledge passed down through generations, and the brutal pragmatism required to keep thousands alive when every resource screamed scarcity. If this journey into the forgotten science of medieval survival has sharpened your understanding of history's true battlefields, hit that like button. Share this with anyone fascinated by how human ingenuity turns desperation into strategy. And subscribe to The Lost Tactician, because history's greatest lessons aren't always written in victory, but in the relentless will to endure. Until next time, stay tactical, stay curious, and remember, the past has much to teach those willing to listen.